Well, welcome to another episode of We Don't Color on the Dog. It's almost become my weekly conversation with Alex Andrade. Representative, thank you for doing this morning.
Hey, morning, Rick.
All right, we've got the legislative session is being extended to work out the budget. There's open battle over what kind of tax cuts, what kind of spending cuts. Give us your take on what's going on.
Well, there's two chambers in the legislature, obviously, and the House chamber is not overly concerned with the governor's veto pen. We know that vetoes are likely coming, and so, why shy away from that? Fortunately, Senate President Ben Albritton, in response to Governor DeSantis' threat to veto a sales tax cut, reneged on the agreement that he had with the House related to our tax cut package overall. It was a little surprising to me personally. I mean, when we're negotiating a top level budget, one of our big negotiating points was we wanted this tax cut. So I don't know why the Senate, which didn't negotiate for that in the grand scheme of things, is the one concerned about it getting vetoed to the point where they renege on this agreement. Yeah, I've never seen a Republican governor fight so hard against a tax cut before.
Well, we know that the polls are saying that property taxes are, so people like the idea of some kind of relief on property taxes. The interesting thing yesterday in the press conference or the roundtable or media event or whatever you want to call what the governor does every day down in Brandon was that he still wants that a property tax is better than a sales tax, but he admitted that at least I think that he said maybe a third, but it's more like 20 to maybe 22, 23% uh is paid by the 80%, 75% is being paid by Florida residents. And that would be it wouldn't be as sweeping as a one-time rebate check might look, but overall it seems to me to be fair to the average citizen.
Well, I don't like the fact that we keep conflating a property tax cut with a sales tax cut. One affects the state budget, the sales tax, and the other affects local budgets, the property tax. I think both can and should be taken up, considered, and probably implemented. It's kind of stunning to me how much DeSantis wants to tell other people what to do, but won't look inward and say we should cut our own state budget to set the example. If he wants to lead by example, he needs to cut the taxes he enjoys and receives and cut the budget that he uses to spend on his own activities. The state budget has ballooned since I've been in office. It was below 100 billion when I first took office back in 2018, and now it's, pushing 120 billion today. We have to get our spending under control, and we should cut taxes as well. We don't need to continue to overspend and overtax while we wait on whether or not local voters, everyday Floridians, next year in November on the ballot, approve by 60% plus any kind of change to property taxes. They're two separate budgets by essentially saying that this property tax cut proposal the sales tax cut proposal undermines property taxes. What DeSantis is saying is he envisions the state government subsidizing the largesse of local governments who, especially down in South Florida, have ballooned their budgets and voted to increase property taxes. He can't come out and say it because it's not conservative, but by saying that the sales tax cut is going to somehow undermine property taxes, he's saying he knows we have to subsidize local governments if we're going to cut property taxes.
Well, and it's come out. We've some of our smaller, more rural counties, they don't have a big sales tax revenue source. They don't have that thought of maybe using bed tax monies. They don't have tourism. They depend on property tax to fund everything. And essentially, and you're sitting with making a sweeping statement, and you've said it several times. The speaker has said it. Give us a plan. Tell us how this is going to work for local governments. And I've talked to commissioners. I've talked to the mayor here. They have no idea what this means for them if it were to happen. Other than
Well,
it could defund police, defund fire protection. It could create a huge nightmare.
And that's the difference between being a toddler and slamming your fists on the table and demanding something that you think is popular versus actually getting into the nuts and bolts and the nitty-gritty of figuring out how this is going to affect government services here in the state. No, I think that property taxes are one of the worst types of taxes you can levy. It's one of the least fair systems. We shouldn't have to pay rent on property we own to the government for the rest of our lives. I agree with that philosophically, but at the end of the day, we have to figure out a way to offset that. And if DeSantis's big bold plan is just for the state to subsidize these local governments, he's not put enough thought into it. It should be on the ballot next year, but what exactly should that policy look like? Should it be a homestead exemption that's just dramatically increased? Should it be a change in the way that we assess the value of property before levying property taxes? Should it be an outright prohibition on levying property taxes? Those are questions that all have different dollar amounts attached to them when the answers come in. And those are things that he doesn't want to engage with us on. He said that he doesn't want to talk with the legislature about it and just keep saying, do your job. It's like, it, I have a 2-year old in my house. And if my 2-year old really wants mac and cheese and I tell her, hey, mac and cheese won't be ready till November 2026. In the interim, we can have chicken nuggets. If she rejects chicken nuggets, then nobody eats. You know what I mean? Like it's like that's the philosophical dynamic that he's hammering away on is like, I want nothing but mac and cheese, and how dare you offer me anything else while I'm waiting until November 2026 to get my mac and cheese. And there's no guarantee the property tax amendment will actually pass. So why should we have our hands tied and prevented from cutting our budget and cutting our own taxes in the interim? It makes no sense to me.
Well, you're looking at in the past, Alex, the way the legislature has dealt with rising property values and rising property tax collections is, at one time they limited the amount that you could increase the valuation. That was one method that's been done and had an impact, and local government adjusted. Another was, like you said, raise the exemption, make it a little bit bigger than it is. That's another way to do it without eliminating it completely. And then, of course, it's kind of, he won't be here. He won't be here to have to deal with any of it or explain it to anybody. It'll be whoever his successor is will have to try to clean up that mess. And that part has been interesting to watch. I just looked at just the general fund budget of the state from before he came into office to where it is now. It's up $18.5 billion, about 60%, just the general fund. So to act like we have managed our resources well and that we've reduced the size of government, it just isn't true. We've got more expenses. You've talked about it before. The governor's office expenses have escalated while other, the legislature staff and others have stayed flat. Uh, it's it's really interesting to see these shows go around the state. Very well scripted. Everybody's reading from a script. Yesterday, and I put it on the blog this morning, Hope Florida was the focus again. The governor wasn't as emotional as he was when he came here last month. They were a little bit better prepared, but their view is that everything has been slanderous and false that's been said about them. They don't have any overhead with Hope Florida, and they've saved $100 million, the taxpayers, and that everything was fine with that $10 million that ended up in a political action committees.
Yeah,
I mean, it's comical, isn't it?
it is comical. Bragging about the overhead ratio of a charity and utilizing $10 million worth of money laundering to brag about it was kind of stunning to me. This charity, the Hope Florida Foundation, spent, according to them, because mind you, the governor's office won't give me the bank records for the foundation itself. They have spent a total of $10.5 million dispersing grants. That includes the two $5 million grants to the Chamber of Commerce and to Save Our Society from Drugs. By claiming that they have a 1% overhead ratio for their charity, They're saying that because they laundered $10 million in Medicaid funds through this charity, that they're operating really efficiently with very little overhead, when in reality, the 500,000 that have actually gone through any kind of process where the board votes on issuing a grant, they've spent $100,000 on overhead. So cutting out the money laundering, the wire fraud of the $10 million in Medicaid money that was laundered through this account, they actually have like a 21, 22% overhead ratio, which is not that great for a charity. But man, once you add in that $10 million in money laundering, their overhead ratio looks really impressive.
Well, and you know, you didn't get the charities didn't come to testify before you, so didn't really get a chance for them to answer any questions. You know, the first part of Hope Florida's life was being run through DCF, so it was through they did it, was it DCF? So it was hidden inside their funding, so it was difficult to find out exactly where the money was. The grants they were handing out, it was hard to figure out where they came from. There was no accounting for that.
Yeah.
It was through that. No, it was through the education fund, wasn't it?
Yeah, before they had a bank account. Yeah, before
Yeah,
they had their own bank account, they used the Florida Department of Education's direct support organization, their
right.
bank account.
Yeah,
But on the Hope Florida operational stuff, I mean, I heard DeSantis yesterday say, we just changed the names of state employees. I mean, that's what they did. They were saying it didn't cost us anything to do this. The premise of this Hope Florida operation is apparently we use an app called Care Portal that is publicly available and free to use right now by anyone in the country. And we changed the name of some state employees and we told them to think outside the box when constituents call with concerns. I still have yet to see anything unique done by the Hope Florida operational arm of state employees with titles changed being told to think outside the box. And unfortunately, no state agency, from the Executive Office of the Governor to DCF to ACA, the Agency for Healthcare Administration, will turn over any documents related to this $10 million. They won't even turn in or show us what they've told the federal government about the settlement with Centene. I know, based on how much they've paid back to the federal government, that they treat every single dollar in that settlement, regardless if it went to the foundation or the state, as Medicaid money. So for them to act like it's not Medicaid money and this was a cherry on top is just patently ridiculous. The plaintiffs' lawyers negotiated on behalf of the state a $67 million settlement in 2022. The state, James Uthmeyer, fired those plaintiffs' lawyers, and 2 years later negotiated a worse deal for the state and said, only give us $57 million. But by the way, send 10 of that we negotiated 2 years ago, without interest, mind you, to the Hope Florida Foundation. It's patently ridiculous. It's laughable how they're trying to spin it. And I don't think Florida voters are buying it. I think the DeSantis' hope that Florida voters are either gullible or stupid and that they can lie their way out of this. Interestingly, I was comparing this to what happened in Mississippi. If you recall, Brett Favre was involved in misuse of TANF money, which is a kind of a Medicaid a Medicaid line using TANF money. Mississippi misspent over $100 million in Medicaid funds, but it took over 7 months after this was discovered even for state indictments to happen, and then it took over a year for federal indictments to happen. I'm confident that based on the information we have and the information that's been developed, that I think we're going to see some law enforcement activity in Florida related to this specific circumstance. I just know it'll take some time.
yeah. I mean that involved. I think Favre was supposed to do some promotional stuff for them and help sell, the program, and ended up in his daughter's volleyball team at Southern Mississippi or some complex. It got rerouted. This is. This has been fascinating to watch, Alex. I mean, as the documents that you've been able to show, and I think any private citizen could walk through the reports and see how the money came in and how quickly it came out, and all of it was done in the dark, behind the scenes, without the state really knowing the settlement was there, without knowing how much of it. All of that got uncovered during the legislative session. That's not transparency.
Well, mind you, we would have never even known about this settlement if we hadn't gotten our hands on one set of minutes from the Hope Florida Foundation that vaguely referenced it. It never informed the state that they had this settlement with Centene. We were the only state in the country not to put out a notice without putting out a press release about our settlement with Centene. Every other state was proud of their settlement with Centene. We were the only state that hid it from the public, and we were the only state where the executive hid it from the legislature. It was just so blatantly, glaringly inappropriate and illegal. And yeah, while we do have some public information, we know that in a matter of like 2 weeks, the settlement occurred and the money ended up in James Uthmeyer's PAC. What we still don't have, because state agencies are refusing to produce them even to the legislature, is documentation related to communications about the settlement, who made the edits to the settlement agreement that at the last minute changed it to direct this money to the foundation, who was involved heavily in state agencies in the governor's office in crafting this edited settlement agreement. And what we don't know is the day-to-day bank account statement from the foundation, because even though they're an arm of a state government agency, DCF, the foundation has turned over their documents to DCF, and now DCF is refusing to produce them to the legislature. I've never seen state agencies kind of huddle up and conspire to withhold information this aggressively. It's definitely concerning, but we're at this point now where state agencies, they're just refusing to be transparent about what occurred to help us get to the bottom of exactly who's involved and when.
Let's go back to now. What's the next step with the legislature? What can our viewers expect to see happening over the next few weeks?
Well, between now and June 30th, at some point we will hopefully negotiate our budget. I don't think it benefits the state if we don't go through a conference process. The conference process would involve people like me as the chair of the House healthcare budget, negotiating the healthcare budget with my Senate counterpart, Jay Trumbull, before we present it to the full legislature for approval. The alternative is called like bumping. Essentially, we declare an impasse at the subcommittee level, and the speaker and the Senate president hash out the entire budget behind closed doors between themselves. I don't think that that behooves or benefits the state, but we do need a budget by the end of June to keep the lights on and keep employees getting paid. So between now and the end of June, we will have a budget. I just don't know if it'll be a budget that's been crafted in the sunshine with full participation of everyone, or if it'll be a budget that has to get hashed out behind closed doors.
So that's kind of what we should be watching for then. If y'all go into conference, if we were told that that's happening, so that should be the flag. Can we just get the four best nerds on each side to go into a room and hash it out? Give them cold pizza and hot beer until they figure out what the budget is.
I think it would be great. I'd love to do that, but I think the legislative process works better when it's public and
Right.
open, and we have documented offers back and forth, and people can kind of follow along and track, like, here's the House's counter offer to the Senate's offer and back and forth, so that we know exactly the process that led us to the budget. But it's not constitutionally or statutorily required that we do that. So we'll have a budget. I just don't know exactly how public the creation of that budget will be.
Alex, again, thank you as always for coming on. It's good to have you back in town. We'll catch up. All right. Take care, my friend.
Thanks, Rick.
All right. Bye.
Thanks for watching, and to keep up with what's going on, be sure and subscribe. Just click on the little dog to the right and click the subscribe button. You can also like this video and click on the bell, which will notify you of new content. This really helps the channel grow. We appreciate you.